This is all your fault, Loki Pan!
Guys? Knock it off! We've got Marillions chasing after us, so go bolt down the doors, now!
Honestly, if you were wondering what that was all about, we just had a small mishap with some Marillions, and Loki decided to do a lightning spell. Anyway, Steven Universe is a very wholesome show that focuses on Steven himself, and it's definitely one of the best TV shows of our time. However, there are some moments in this kids show that definitely leave us with fears, thrills, and chills, literally. So, for this list, I'm going over some of the Steven Universe moments that practically made us want to go. So, get ready for some of the most spine-chilling moments in the Steven Universe franchise that practically made our hairs turn white and made us have a hard time trying to get over the shock of it all. So here we are, top 10 Steven moments. Okay, so technically with this one, it's not basically from the actual Steven Universe, it's the spin-off Steven Universe Future, but I had to put it in there anyway. So, Steven, Pearl, and Volleyball decide to head over to the reef to fix Volleyball's injury. Unfortunately, they learned that Volleyball's injury is not physical, it's actually psychological damage. And of course, during the banter between Pearl and Volleyball, her scars get worse when she tries to say that she's okay when we all know that she's not. And Steven having to be given a vile reminder of what his mother had done yet again, and the list of horrible things that she's done, Steven just finally lost it, and well, it literally brought the house down. It was also by then that it really activated the reef, causing the two of them to be remodified and rejuvenated, kind of like we've had that rejuvenation process. And yeah, this was a very intense scene. It wasn't the scariest, but the whole gravity of the situation definitely took a turn for the worst. It wasn't like they were literally dying, but Pearl and Volleyball were dealing with the grief of what Rose Quartz / Pink Diamond had left behind. And yeah, and again, I put it number 10 because it's not technically super scary, but it was enough to make us want to scream, "Not again! Please don't make us live that torture again in the Steven Universe movie." In the aftermath of Jailbreak, Garnet, Pearl, and Amethyst try to search for Lapis Lazuli and Jasper through the ocean. So far they weren't very fortunate and decided to turn in for the night. And Steven soon had a wild black and white dream from the 1950s, a sort of like the Brady Bunch Bewitched for some of you who are fanatics of the 1950 classic sitcoms. Anyway, as he opened the door to see if Connie, his date, would soon arrive, he was in for a shock of his life when we see Lapis pouring water out of her eyes and out of her mouth, sooner or later creating a huge tsunami which nearly flooded him and everything else. So, of course, I put it at number 9 because it could have gone darker. They could have used blood instead of water for this. But it didn't change the fact of just how unnerving it was, as well as it being such a huge jump scare. It was hard for us to kind of get out of our minds. Sheesh. So many of you remembered Home from Movie, where Ruby, the Navy Ruby, from Ruby Square practically crashed down on Earth. Steven, of course, was willing to give Navy a chance. Well, that's Peridot. But for Lapis, she definitely became a little suspicious of how easy it was for her to just warm up to them like that. Unfortunately, her hunch was right. Because, turns out Navy was a very deadly sociopath who wanted nothing more than to throw the crew off just so she could get her ship back. And I put her on this list because it's just so freaky and disturbing. But rest assured, the next couple of things will be scarier than the last. Yes, the human zoo. At first it comes off as something of a paradise, something that you just want to lay around in and play all day. Though Garnet didn't call it insidious for nothing. Apparently these humans have no will of their own. They go on a certain schedule. And of course they have a special ritual that, well, Greg was very reluctant to get involved in. The Choosing was basically a breeding program in order to keep the human race alive. Greg and Steven try to be reasonable and say that you can't love someone automatically because some voice in your head tells you. Well, I mean in the literal sense, not in the metaphorical sense. However, the Zoomans didn't take the rejection well. They just went flat out crying, and they couldn't register that they were hurt. All the Zoomans wanted to be with Greg, and Greg just simply said no. This was definitely unexpected, especially in the Steven universe. And the reason why I put it on this list was just because of how it was presented. The way the Zoomans were all just putting their hands toward Greg, just begging for him to take the pain away. Trust me, this feels a lot like the Twilight Zone if many of you have actually seen this show. And even by then, it was so creepy that even Steven practically grabbed his dad and booked it out of there as best as he could. So Jailbreak and The Return were practically the real deal. Basically, this is when stuff gets really dark at that point. So The Return is where Jasper, Lapis, and Peridot return back to Earth, while Steven was told to try to return to a safer place while the gems deal with them at Beach City. However, Steven refused and wanted to face off with them. And of course, our three homeworld gals showed up, and Jasper wanted nothing more than a fight. And boy, did she get one with Garnet before she got a hold of Steven. And she only had a special gem destabilizer. And it definitely was a shocker when we had a first ever quote-unquote character death. We just saw poor Garnet getting zapped, slowly breaking apart right before she poofs. And this was definitely a huge shocker for all of us, because this was not only a first time we've seen Garnet get defeated, but this was also where Jasper was at her scariest. Unfortunately, I put this further up on the list on the account of how it was very different in terms of Before Peridot joined the crew, she was, of course, the usual homeworld gal, our near-robotic gem. So, of course, Steven and the crew go to the kindergarten to see what Peridot was doing. She escapes, but Garnet and Steven decide to investigate, and boy, were they in the shock of their lives, as were we all. This was the debut of the Gem Mutants, a very vicious experimentation where combined all the shards of Shattered Rebel and gems, and thus resulting in a mishmash of body parts. This took on a new form of body horror. Heck, it was so disturbing, even Garnet, our usually stoic Gem, was practically in so much shock she couldn't register what the hell to do next. It's by then I put it on number 4 on this list on the account that this was a very spine-chilling moment. I mean, all of us were practically stunned at the direction that the Steven Universe group had gone through to make up this eerie monster creatures that are so different from the corrupted gems that we could have been battling in the past. And it was definitely something we would never forget. Very rarely do we ever encounter something like a haunted location in kids shows. More or less, I'm not much of an expert on it. Anyway, so Steven joins Ronaldo, Sadie, and Lars for a special haunted house scary movie night together, and they got more than they bargained for. Let's just say if you watched Monster House, you know where I'm gonna go with this. Apparently, some strange force causes everything to come to life and, like the scarecrows, attack Steven and Ronaldo and Lars in the process. When the lights go out, he's, oh yeah, it was like your stereotypical haunted house sort of deal. And there was even that ominous whisper, Lars. But what really was a humdinger was when we learned a bit about Lars's past with Ronaldo, and the two used to be friends. And when Sadie went up and missing, Ronaldo was so furious that he thought it was better off to try to sacrifice him in order to bring Sadie back. But thankfully, Steven somehow managed to get called off and make the nightmare stop. But it was still a very creepy moment. It turns out that their haunted house had a gem inside that thought it was being attacked, so it probably gave off the ghost scenario that Ronaldo had been thinking of for a very long time. But it still didn't change the fact of how far it was going to go in Steven Universe, and I put number 3 because it was still such an insanely creepy moment, and what may not be as scary as what some people think, but still was quite a shocker. We've all had major freakouts when we saw the mascots like Chuck E. Cheese or even McDonald's and the Burger King guy himself, and of course it freaked us to no end. But so it would be no surprise for many of you who remember Frybo in that episode of Steven Universe, you would understand why. So originally, Steven used a gem artifact to help out his friend PD. However, that backfired in the worst way possible. Apparently, it resulted in a horrific monster that kept stuffing people with fries. Added with Pearl's spear and some ketchup, he became a walking nightmare fuel. And it almost seemed like he was practically unstoppable. Heck, if anyone read Goosebumps, The Twilight Zone, Are You Afraid of the Dark? This would probably take the cake in reiterating some of what we feared most. And probably would give us mental scarring to this day. Thankfully he didn't stick around, but my God, was he a terrifying nightmare fuel. And I put in number 2 because of his appearance, the way he was displayed, and it was definitely a shocking jump scare for all of us, because it looked like something that was friendly and cute, and then it turned into something pretty creepy and nightmarish, where we would feel like we would never want to watch the episode Frybo ever again. Though I know many of you are wondering at this point, what could be possibly scarier than Frybo? Well, if many of you have remembered in my previous videos, White Diamond is something to be reckoned with. So, in Change Your Mind, the Crystal Gems is finally face off with White Diamond herself, as well as the rest of the diamonds. They managed to get through Blue and Yellow thanks to Steven. However, they were about to leave when White intercepted them. And this is definitely where we get to see a horrific capabilities. Now, many of you have remembered why we had them. Again, I had White Diamond on the list because of her powers and what she did towards the tail end of the show. So, she definitely was very cold, cool, and calculating in the Legs from Here to Homeworld, but we definitely learned a bit more about her in the remainders of Diamond Days, which also included a very frightful entrance through the use of her mental powers. You see, when Blue and Yellow said that they didn't want to do anything anymore, and when the Crystal Gems faced them off, well, they were all drained of life right then and there before Steven's very eyes. He was reaching up to the point where Steven was practically surrounded by miniature clones of White Diamond through the voice and practically being little puppets. And just as the shock couldn't get through enough, and we found ourselves staring right into a face of terror as Steven's gem was slowly plucked out of his belly button. Yes, we were slowly witnessing Steven dying before our very eyes. So this is why I put it at number 1, because this was an insanely intense moment that will probably scar us. Heck, it took us forever to get over it. So I put it number 1 because this showed of how unpredictable and frightening White Diamond was. Heck, they could have continued more if they had more time and effort. But I still felt like this was the biggest moment in Steven Universe where we couldn't help but scream our heads off and lose our minds even after commercial break. And that's why I put it at number 1. So folks, this is Dragon Videos ready to sign off. I hope you enjoyed one of the many videos for the Halloween month. Stay tuned because there shall be more to come.